Macron was forced to reshuffle after some of his former ministers lost in those lower house elections last month. Our French politics editor, Marc, is with me on set to talk a bit more about all of this. Marc, first of all, just set the stage for us. Who's in and who's out?
Well, we just got the list a few minutes ago coming from the presidential palace, the Élysée, which is obviously the tradition. We have quite a large government, over 40 ministers, if you include the junior ministers, the delegate ministers, as they're known. The main ministers remain. I mean, all the big names will still be in government. The Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, Finance Minister, Bruno Le Maire, Justice Minister, Éric Dupond-Moretti. But we do have a few changes, some of them because a rule had been edicted by Emmanuel Macron, whereby if you were running for the legislative elections and you lost, you were out of government. And this is what happened to an important ministry, the Ministry of Health, where Brigitte Bourguignon was beaten, and she is replaced by Francois Braun, who is an experienced hand in the health sector. So he becomes the health minister. Obviously, it is important because of COVID, but also because of the crisis in the health sector in France, where you have lots of problems to solve. So that's an important appointment. Another important appointment is the reshuffle of the spokesperson of the government. Olivier Veran was just appointed a few weeks ago. She's already out. She's moving to have a junior ministry within the finance ministry. She'll be in charge of small companies and so on. And she's replaced by Olivier Veran, who was, in the previous mandate, the health minister, so well-known personality to the French. And he had been appointed a few weeks ago as the minister in charge of relations between the government and the parliament, which is obviously a key position because of the new political geography we've seen in recent weeks. But he's now going to be the spokesperson for the government, the one who comes after each cabinet meeting to explain what has been decided. And that's basically the main appointments. Those going out, obviously, there is Damien Abad, who was the Minister of Solidarity, as it's known. He was mired in controversy because he has been accused of rape. And now there are some investigations that were formally opened. And we know the Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, had said that if these accusations were backed up by a formal investigation, there was no way he could stay. So he's been kicked out of the government and been replaced by the president of the Red Cross. There is another minister, junior minister, a woman who was accused by other women of rape. She was working as a gynecologist. She remains in government because, according to the same rule, there's no official investigation into the allegations against her. But we're not seeing many changes. The other important ministry is the ministry in charge of the ecological transition. Amélie de Montchalin was appointed as the minister, but she was beaten in the elections. She's replaced by Christophe Bechu, who's essentially a right-wing politician who's close to the former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe. This is a key position because Emmanuel Macron has said, the green transition is absolutely central. He will have an important position. But obviously, the Greens are already saying, well, when has Christophe Bechu ever talked about green transition? So not a lot of big names, more ministers. Emmanuel Macron wanted to reward his close allies, his former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, who has his own political party, François Bayrou, this centrist leader who was not happy with the first draft, if I may use the word, of the government. But this is not going to change the equation. The equation is still going to be a very difficult one, especially in Parliament, where Emmanuel Macron doesn't have a majority. This new government will not change the balance of power. It will not change the way the opposition is seeing the government. They will need to get a majority for each text because it's very difficult to see how there could be a coalition government in France, and this is not a coalition government, clearly.
So speaking of change, how much was this reshuffle all about Macron trying to convince voters that he's hearing their demands for change?
Well, not much. I mean, the problem is Emmanuel Macron took a lot of time to appoint the prime minister and then her first government. And there he traveled abroad for several international summits, yes, but he took a lot of time and he apparently made a lot of calls and got a lot of rebuttals, trying to offer some positions to maybe newcomers, people from civil society and so on, but there are no big names. There are no, really people who he was able to convince that could really at least make a difference in the minds of the French public. All the names I just mentioned are not really well known. Yes, they're known in political circles, but this is not going to really wow people and say, okay, Macron really heard us. It's going to be very, very difficult for Emmanuel Macron. He realizes that. He also had to make sure he respects parity between men and women, and so this took a lot of time. And we have really a government. When presidents are elected, they often say, "Okay, I'm really going to have a small government because we don't need to reward people here and there." There you have it. Over 40 ministers. There are going to be lots of people talking every week at the weekly cabinet meeting. But this is a new era for Emmanuel Macron. He doesn't have the majority in parliament. He has a rather large government with different minds that will express themselves. So it's going to be much more difficult for him to govern the way he likes to govern from the top down.
Marc, thanks for that. France 24's French politics editor Marc Perelman.